I stood behind the living room door, my hand frozen on the cold brass knob, listening to them laugh. They had no idea I was there until I heard my father mention my grandmother's house and the sum of $50,000. That was when I understood. They did not intend to just steal my inheritance. They intended to make me thank them for the robbery. My name is Sophie Love, and at 29 years old, I had spent the better part of a decade trying to outrun the shadow of the colossal limestone structure looming in front of me. The Whitaker estate sat on the highest hill in the county, a testament to generational wealth that felt less like a home and more like a mausoleum for living egos. I had not set foot on this driveway in 2 years. I had not spoken to the man who owned it in nearly 3. Yet, when the text message had arrived that morning, a summons disguised as a casual invitation, I had come. Old habits, specifically the desperate, childlike desire for parental validation, were difficult to break. I parked my modest sedan between a glossy black Range Rover and a vintage convertible that probably cost more than my entire college tuition. The engine of my car ticked as it cooled, a stark, metallic sound against the oppressive silence of the perfectly manicured grounds. I took a breath, checking my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked tired. I looked manageable. I looked exactly how they liked me, or so I thought. I walked up the front steps, the heavy oak doors unlocked, as if they expected the staff to be the only ones handling the perimeter. I stepped into the foyer. The smell hit me first. It was a specific scent of lemon polish, old money, and cold air conditioning that I associated exclusively with judgment. The house was quiet, but not empty. I could feel the vibrations of life somewhere deep inside its belly. I did not call out. I did not announce my arrival. I simply walked across the marble floor, my sneakers making no sound against the stone. I intended to head to the kitchen, grab a glass of water, and compose myself before facing my father. But as I passed the drawing room, the formal space my father liked to call the library, despite him rarely reading anything other than financial statements, I heard a laugh. It was a high, tinkling sound. My sister, Clara. I stopped. The door to the drawing room was ajar. Just a sliver of darkness cutting through the white jamb. I should have kept walking. I should have knocked. But then I heard a voice that made my stomach turn over. It was not my father. It was a man I did not recognize, his tone smooth and oily, the kind of voice that sold disastrous timeshares to pensioners. "The appraisal on Cedar Hollow came back yesterday," the stranger said. "It is significantly higher than the tax assessment. If we put it on the open market, you are looking at 7 figures, easy. The land alone is prime for development." I froze. Cedar Hollow. That was not their house. That was Grandma's house. It was the small, rambling Victorian property 2 towns over, where I had spent every summer until I was 18. It was the only place in the world where I had felt seen, not as an investment, but as a person. When Grandma passed 5 years ago, the will had been complex, tied up in trusts and stipulations, but the understanding was that the property was to remain in the family, a sanctuary. "We do not want the open market." My father's voice cut in. It was deep, authoritative, the voice he used when he was closing a deal that would ruin someone else's quarter. "We need the liquidity, and we need it quiet. If we list it, people start asking questions about why we are liquidating assets. The board gets skittish." "So, what is the play?" Clara asked. I could picture her, lounging on the leather Chesterfield, likely scrolling through her phone while deciding the fate of my childhood sanctuary. "Sophie," my father said. Hearing my name in that room, spoken with such detached calculation, felt like a physical blow. I stepped closer to the crack in the door, holding my breath. "What about her?" Clara asked, a sneer audible in her voice. "She has not been home in years. She is probably living in some studio apartment eating instant noodles." "Exactly," the stranger said. "That is the leverage." "The title is technically held in a generation-skipping trust," my father explained, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur that I had to strain to hear. "But there is a clause. If the primary beneficiary, Sophie, agrees to a buyout, the trust dissolves, and the asset reverts to the estate, meaning, to me. She will never sign, Clara said. She loved that dusty old place. She will sign, my father corrected her, because she is broke. I had a private investigator run a soft check. She is renting, no significant assets. She drives a 10-year-old car. We offer her a lump sum, immediate transfer, in exchange for her waiving all future claims to the property and the trust. How much? Clara asked. I leaned in, my hand hovering over the cold brass handle. I needed to know the price of my soul. I needed to know what my father thought I was worth. $50,000, my father said. Silence hung in the room for a second, and then the stranger chuckled. 50,000? For a property appraised at 1.2 million? That is robbery. Robert. It is not robbery, my father said, his voice devoid of any warmth. It is mercy. $50,000 changes her life right now. It pays off her student loans. It gives her a down payment on a mediocre condo. She is simple. She thinks small. She sees $50,000 and she sees a fortune. She does not see the million she is losing. She should be grateful I'm offering her anything at all. I could just drag this out in probate court until she bleeds dry from legal fees. But this is cleaner. And you think she will just take it? The stranger asked. She is weak, Clara said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. She has always been the soft one. You cry a little, Dad. Tell her you are doing this to protect the legacy. Tell her the house is falling apart and becoming a liability. Tell her you want to give her a head start. She eats that emotional garbage up. She will sign the papers with tears in her eyes and thank you for the pen. I stood there, and I felt something inside me fracture. It was not a break. It was a realignment. For 29 years, I had carried the narrative that I was the black sheep because I was not smart enough, not ruthless enough, not successful enough. I had stayed away because I felt inadequate. I had believed their subtle digs about my quaint lifestyle and my lack of ambition. I had believed that my father, despite his hardness, loved me in his own broken way. But this was not broken love. This was predation. They were not just planning to steal over $1 million from me. That was almost forgivable in the shark tank of our family history. No. What made my blood run cold? What made the tips of my fingers numb against the doorframe was the absolute certainty they had in my stupidity. They were banking on my affection for them. They were weaponizing my own desire to be a good daughter against me. Draft the paperwork, my father said. I want it ready for tonight. We will do it after dinner. Get her nice and nostalgic. Maybe open a bottle of the 1996 vintage and then present it as a gift. Here, Sophie, because we love you, we are buying you out of that burden. You are a genius, Dad, Clara said. I am a businessman, he replied. And Sophie? Sophie is a liability we are finally turning into an asset. I took a step back. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to kick open the door. I wanted to storm in there and scream. I wanted to throw the vase on the hallway table against the wall. I wanted to tell them I heard every word, that I knew the house was worth over $1 million, that I knew they were vultures in designer suits. But Grandma's voice echoed in the back of my mind, a memory from a summer storm when I was 12. Anger is a fire. Sophie, if you let it out wild, it burns everything, including you. If you keep it inside, it becomes an engine. If I walked in there now, I would get the satisfaction of a scene. I would scream. They would deny. They would gaslight. My father would switch instantly to his concerned parent persona, claiming I misunderstood, that the $1 million appraisal was speculative, that the taxes were too high. He would spin the web, and because I was emotional, I would look unstable. I would leave with nothing. They would find another way to take the house, or they would let it rot just to spite me. No. I took another step back, then another. I moved with the precision of a ghost. I made sure my breathing was silent. I navigated the foyer, stepping exactly where I knew the floor was solid stone. I reached the front door. I opened it slowly, timing the click of the latch with the distant sound of a landscaping truck passing on the main road. I slipped out into the humid afternoon air. The sun was still shining, the birds were still singing. The world looked exactly the same as it had 10 minutes ago, but the landscape of my life had been scorched earth. I walked to my car. I did not run. Running was for people who were scared. I was not scared. I was clarified. I opened the car door and slid into the driver's seat. The heat inside the vehicle was stifling, but I did not feel it. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. I looked at the dashboard clock. It had been 11 minutes since I arrived. 11 minutes to destroy a lifetime of illusions. I looked up at the house one last time. I could see the window of the drawing room. They were still in there, laughing, drinking their expensive scotch, congratulating themselves on fleecing the slow daughter. They thought Sophie Love was a lamb they could lead to the slaughterhouse with a polite smile. They had no idea that the Sophie Love who walked up those steps, the one who wanted their approval, the one who believed in family, had died in that hallway. I started the engine. I put the car in reverse. As I shifted gears, I caught my eyes in the rearview mirror again. The tiredness was gone. The softness that Clara mocked was gone. The eyes staring back at me were hard, flat, and darker than I had ever seen them. They were the eyes of a stranger. They were the eyes of someone who just realized that in this family, you were either the butcher or the cattle. I was done being the cattle. I backed the car out, the gravel crunching under my tires like breaking bones. I did not drive down the driveway toward the exit immediately. I paused, letting the engine idle. I pulled my phone from my purse and looked at the text my father had sent earlier. "Come home. Sophie, we have missed you." I typed a reply, my thumbs moving steady and sure. "Running a bit late. Traffic is a nightmare. See you in an hour. Love you." I hit send. I was not leaving. I was regrouping. I needed 45 minutes to stop shaking. I needed to go to the gas station down the road, splash cold water on my face, and construct a mask so perfect that even my father, the master of deceit, would not see the cracks. They wanted the grateful, stupid daughter? Fine, I would give her to them. I would give them exactly what they wanted, right up until the moment I took everything they had. I shifted into drive and rolled down the long, winding driveway. I reached the main gate and turned left, away from the house. As I accelerated, the wind rushing through the slightly open window, I whispered the number aloud, tasting the insult on my tongue. $50,000. The car picked up speed. "You should be grateful." I mimicked my father's voice, cold and hollow. I let out a short, sharp laugh that sounded nothing like me. It sounded like the woman I was about to become. I would take their 50,000. Oh, I would take it, and then I would use it to bury them. I drove toward the horizon, the plan already forming in the cold, dark corners of my mind where my love for them used to live. They had invited a victim to dinner. They were going to be very surprised when a predator showed up instead. The Holiday Inn Express on the outskirts of Columbus was not the kind of place one would expect to find the heir to the Whittaker dynasty, but anonymity was a currency I valued far more than thread count. I had driven for 40 minutes after leaving the estate, my hands shaking on the wheel. Before pulling into this nondescript parking lot, I checked in under my middle name, paid cash, and locked the door behind me. I did not cry. The time for tears had evaporated in that hallway. Now was the time for autopsy. I sat at the small, wobbly desk pushed against the wall. The hum of the mini-fridge the only sound in the room. I opened my laptop. It was a matte black machine, custom-built, devoid of brand logos, a tool of my trade that my family knew nothing about. To them, I was Sophie the drifter, Sophie the disappointment who worked in computers and probably fixed printers for a living. They had never asked for specifics, and I had never volunteered them. That ignorance was now my greatest tactical advantage. My father was a shark, but he was an old-world shark. He believed power resided in handshakes, mahogany boardrooms, and intimidating silence. He did not understand that real power today lived in servers, in metadata, and in the digital footprints careless men left behind. He had mentioned running a soft check on me. That meant he had hired a private investigator who used public databases. It was lazy. I, however, was not lazy. I cracked my knuckles and began. I did not need to hack into his bank accounts illegally. I simply needed to access the family trust portal. Technically, until I signed those papers, I was still a beneficiary. My access privileges had never been revoked, likely because my father assumed I was too incompetent to navigate the complex interface of the wealth management firm he used. He had set my password 6 years ago, Sophie123. He had probably never imagined I would change it, or that I would set up a mirror alert for every document uploaded to the shared drive. I logged in. The screen flooded with rows of PDFs and Excel spreadsheets. I started downloading everything: tax returns, profit and loss statements for the holding company, credit card statements, and the internal memos between him and his wealth managers. The first thing I looked for was the health of the main estate. My father projected an image of invincible wealth: the cars, the parties, the constant renovations. It all screamed endless liquidity. But as I opened the balance sheet for the last fiscal quarter, the numbers told a story of a man drowning in slow motion. The primary operating account was overdrawn. There were 3 separate loans taken out against the commercial properties in downtown Cleveland, all with balloon payments due within the next 6 months. The interest rates were predatory, the kind of terms you only accepted when traditional banks had already said no. I scrolled down to the liability column. It was a sea of red. He was leveraged at nearly 80%, one bad market turn, one deal falling through, and the entire house of cards would collapse. "Where is the money going?" I whispered to the empty room. I pulled up the transaction history for the last 2 years. It was a mess of wire transfers, but a pattern emerged within minutes. Recurring payments of $25,000, sometimes $50,000, were being sent to a shell company listed as Orion Consulting LLC. The payments were marked as retainer fees or advisory services. I ran a quick background search on Orion Consulting. It was registered in Delaware to a registered agent, a dead end for most. But I dug deeper, cross-referencing the tax ID number with public filings. I found a link to a residential address in Miami, a condo. I pulled up the deed. The owner of the condo was not a consultant. It was a woman named Veronica Miller. I recognized the name immediately. She was my father's executive assistant from 5 years ago, the one who had been quietly let go after my mother started asking questions. My father wasn't just bad at business. He was paying hush money, or perhaps it was child support, or perhaps he was just keeping a mistress in a lifestyle she demanded. Regardless, Orion Consulting was a black hole sucking dry the family reserves. But that was not the only leak. I opened the folder labeled Supplemental Cards, Clara. If my father's spending was a tragedy, my sister's was a farce. The statements were a testament to unchecked narcissism. $11,000 at a boutique in Paris, $4,000 for a weekend at a spa in Sedona, $6,000 for a spiritual retreat that seemed to consist mostly of buying crystals and champagne. I compared the dates. Every time Clara maxed out a card, there was a corresponding panic in the main account, a transfer from savings, a liquidation of stocks, a desperate shuffle of funds to cover the minimum payment. She was bleeding him dry, and he was letting her do it. He was terrified of her tantrums. Or perhaps he needed her adoration so badly he was willing to bankrupt himself to buy it. I sat back, the blue light of the screen illuminating my face. It made sense now. The desperation I had heard in his voice behind the door was not greed. It was survival. He needed the cash infusion from selling Grandma's house not to expand his empire, but to keep the lights on. He needed $1 million, and he needed it fast. But why $50,000 for me? Why not offer me a fair share? If he had offered me $200,000, I might have considered it. I went to the email archives. This was risky, accessing his personal correspondence, but I found a shared folder that he and the family attorney used for estate planning. I searched for my name. Hundreds of hits. Most were automated notifications about trust disbursements that I never received because they were routed back into the principal. But then I found an email thread from 3 months ago. The subject line was Liquidity Solutions, Cedar Hollow. I clicked it open. My heart hammered against my ribs. A slow, heavy rhythm. The email was from the man whose voice I had heard in the drawing room. The stranger. His name was Marcus Thorne, a fixer, known in legal circles for handling difficult assets. Robert. The email read, "We have run the numbers. The property is your only viable exit strategy before the quarter ends. If you miss the loan payment on the warehouse district, the bank calls the note. You go under." My father's reply was short, I know, but the trust locks the property until Sophie turns 30 or signs it over. She turns 30 in 11 months. I do not have 11 months. Thorne's reply. Then we accelerate the timeline. We need a buyout, but we cannot offer her market value. You do not have the capital to pay her $500,000. You barely have $50,000 in liquid cash right now. My father. She will want an appraisal. Thorne. She does not get an appraisal. We frame it as a gift, a rescue. We tell her the house is a money pit, full of mold and structural issues. We scare her with the liability. Then we offer the $50,000 as a kindness, a clean break. If she signs the waiver, the trust dissolves. The title reverts to you, and we flip the house to the developer within 48 hours. The developer is already lined up, all-cash deal. And then, the final email in the chain, sent just 2 days ago by my father. Proceed. Sophie is the final solution to the cash flow problem. She is soft. She is not like us. She will thank me for taking the burden off her hands. Get the papers ready for Friday. I stared at the words. The final solution. She is not like us. He was right. I was not like them. I did not view family members as assets to be liquidated. I did not view my child as a stopgap for my own financial incompetence. I took a screenshot of the email. Then I downloaded the entire thread. I saved it to an encrypted drive, then backed it up to a secure cloud server 3 times. I needed a second opinion, not because I doubted what I saw, but because the legality of what they were attempting was complex, and I needed to know exactly how tight the noose was. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had not used in a year. It rang twice before a gruff voice answered. "This line is for emergencies only," the voice said. "This is an emergency, David," I said. David was a forensic accountant and legal strategist. I had met during a consulting gig in Chicago. He was expensive, he was cynical, and he was the best in the business at dissecting financial fraud. "Sophie," he said, his tone shifting instantly to professional alertness. "It has been a while. Talk to me." "I need you to look at some documents," I said. "I am sending you a secure link. It involves a generation-skipping trust, a coerced buyout, and a potential fraud regarding property value." "Family?" he asked. He knew enough of my background to guess. Yes. I heard the rapid clicking of a keyboard as he opened the files I had just uploaded. I waited. The silence stretched for 3 minutes. "Sophie," David said, and his voice was grave. "This is not just a bad deal. This is predation. The waiver they want you to sign? I am looking at the draft attached to the email. It has a hidden clause in the definitions section. By accepting the $50,000, you are not just selling the house, you are retroactively waiving your right to audit the trust management for the last 10 years. My grip on the phone tightened. "Explain." "It means," David said, "that if you sign this, you cannot sue him for the mismanagement of the funds. And looking at these balance sheets, he has been dipping into your trust fund to pay for his overhead for years. It is illegal. It is embezzlement. But this document cleans the slate. He is buying his immunity for $50,000. I felt a cold chill wash over me. It wasn't just about the house. He had been stealing from me for years, and now he was trying to get me to sign a permission slip for the theft. "What are my options?" I asked. "You have 2, David said. Option 1, you hire a lawyer, file an injunction, and freeze the assets. It will be public, it will be messy, and it will drag on for years. He will fight you with your own money until there is nothing left. And option 2? You walk away. David said. You let him have the house. You cut your losses and disappear. It is safer. These people. Sophie, your father is desperate. Desperate men are dangerous. If you corner him, he will lash out. I looked at the image of the house on my screen. Cedar Hollow. I remembered the smell of lavender in the garden. I remembered my grandmother brushing my hair on the porch, telling me that this house was the one place where I would always be safe. My father wanted to turn that sanctuary into a quick cash grab to pay for his mistress and my sister's vacations. He wanted to erase my history to save his future. I am not walking away, I said. My voice surprised me. It was steady. It was cold. Sophie, David warned, if you engage, you have to be ready to burn it down. You cannot do this halfway. If you want to beat him, you have to be smarter, faster, and more ruthless than he is. He thinks I am stupid, I said. He thinks I am broke. He thinks I am alone. That is your edge, David said. Keep it. Let him believe the lie until it is too late. I will, I said. David, I need you to prepare a document for me. I need a counter-contract, something that looks exactly like what he wants me to sign, but with a modification. What kind of modification? I want to separate the legal liability, I said. I will give him the house, but I will not give him the immunity, and I want to ensure that when the house sells, the proceeds do not go where he thinks they are going. That is risky, David said. If he reads it, he won't read it, I said. He is arrogant. He thinks he wrote the rules. He won't check to see if I rewrote them. I can draft it, David said slowly. But Sophie, once you do this, there is no going back to Sunday dinners. There never were Sunday dinners, David, I said. There were just business meetings where I was the meal. I hung up the phone. I sat in the silence of the hotel room. I watched the cursor blink on the screen. The plan was forming, sharp and jagged in my mind. I was not going to expose him, not yet. That would be too easy, and it would give him time to maneuver. No, I was going to let him think he had won. I was going to let him believe his plan had worked perfectly. I would play the part of the grateful daughter. I would sign his papers. I would take his $50,000 with a trembling hand and a thank you. And then, when he was standing on the precipice of his victory, celebrating his genius, I would give him a gentle push. I closed the laptop. I stood up and walked to the bathroom mirror. I splashed cold water on my face, scrubbing away the road dust. When I looked up, the reflection was familiar, but different. The softness around the mouth was gone. The hesitation in the eyes had hardened into resolve. I was going back to Cedar Hollow. I needed to see it one last time before I turned it into a weapon. I needed to say goodbye to the ghost of the girl who used to live there, and hello to the woman who was about to bring the whole dynasty crashing down. I grabbed my keys. It was time to return to the lion's den. But this time, I wasn't bringing a peace offering. I was bringing a trap. The drive to Cedar Hollow was a 40-minute journey through time. I left the sterile, frantic energy of the interstate and turned onto the winding two-lane roads that cut through the deep woods of the county. The trees here were older, their branches interlocking overhead to create a tunnel of green and gold light. This was the road I had traveled 1,000 times in my childhood, usually with my face pressed against the glass, desperate to escape the suffocating expectations of my parents' house for the unconditional sanctuary of my grandmother's. When the house finally broke through the tree line, I pulled my car to the side of the road and killed the engine. Cedar Hollow House was not a monument to ego like my father's estate. It was a Victorian sprawl painted a soft, butter yellow that had faded over the years to a creamy white. It had a wraparound porch that seemed to hug the structure, and a turret that looked out over the valley. To a developer, it was just wood and land. To my father, it was a line item on a spreadsheet to be liquidated. To me, it was the only place I had ever been able to breathe. I stepped out of the car. The silence here was different. It was not the heavy, judgmental silence of the Whitaker estate. It was a living silence, filled with the rustle of wind in the oaks and the distant call of a mourning dove. I walked up the gravel driveway, the stones crunching under my boots. I had the spare key on my ring. a heavy iron skeleton key that my father had likely forgotten I possessed. He had changed the locks on his own home 3 times in the last decade, but he had ignored Cedar Hollow, letting it sit like a forgotten relic. I climbed the porch steps. The wood was gray and dry. Thirsting for oil, I ran my hand over the railing. I could almost see Grandma Eleanor sitting there in her wicker chair, a glass of iced tea sweating on the table beside her. She had been a formidable woman, sharp-tongued and steel-spined, the only person my father had ever truly feared. I unlocked the front door and pushed it open. The air inside was stale, trapped in a time capsule of dust and memory. I walked into the foyer, and the smell hit me. Lavender, old paper, and the faint, sweet scent of wood polish. It was the smell of safety. I moved into the living room. The furniture was covered in white sheets, looking like ghosts of the conversations we used to have. I pulled the sheet off Grandma's favorite armchair. Dust motes danced in the shaft of sunlight cutting through the heavy velvet drapes. I sat down, sinking into the cushion. I closed my eyes and let the memory wash over me. I was 16, crying because my father had called my college application essay pedestrian. Grandma had walked in, taken the paper from my hands, read it, and then set it on the table. "Sophie," she had said, her voice rough like unpolished stone. "Your father wants you to be impressive. I want you to be substantial. There is a difference. Impressive is a firework. It flashes and dies. Substantial is a mountain. It endures." She had sat across from me, her eyes locking onto mine. "You are waiting for him to tell you that you are good enough. He never will, not because you aren't, but because if you know your worth, he can't control you. Don't ask for permission to be respected, child. Just command it. Command it." I opened my eyes. The nostalgia evaporated, replaced by the cold reality of the present. I stood up and began to walk through the house, looking not with the eyes of a granddaughter, but with the eyes of an investigator. My father had claimed the house was a money pit, a liability falling apart. I needed to see if that was true, or if it was another fabrication. I went to the kitchen. The vintage linoleum was intact. The cabinets were solid oak. Aside from dust, there was no rot. I checked the ceilings in the hallway for water stains. Pristine. The foundation, which I checked from the basement door, showed no signs of shifting. The house was not falling apart. It was simply sleeping. But then, I found the anomaly. In the dining room, usually an empty space, I found a collection of industrial humidifiers. They were not running now, but they were plugged in. Next to them were buckets of water. The wallpaper in the corner had begun to peel, curling away from the plaster in wet, sickly strips. I stepped closer. This was not natural decay. This was manufactured damage. Someone had been running these machines in a closed room to force the wallpaper to peel, creating the visual illusion of deep-seated moisture and mold issues. It was a stage set. When the appraiser, likely someone on Marcus Thorne's payroll, walked through, they would photograph this corner and write a report declaring the house a biological hazard, requiring tens of thousands of dollars in remediation. It would justify the low valuation. It would justify the $50,000 offer. I took out my phone. I photographed the humidifiers. I photographed the plugs in the wall. I photographed the perfectly dry ceiling directly above the water damage, proving the moisture was coming from the room, not a leak. I moved to the library. Here, the disrespect was more personal. The beautiful mahogany shelves, once filled with first editions and Grandma's gardening journals, were now cluttered with cardboard boxes. I opened one. It was full of Clara's cast-offs, designer shoes with broken heels, handbags from 3 seasons ago, unopened beauty products. My sister was using Grandma's library, the room where Eleanor Whitaker had taught me how to read a balance sheet, as her personal overflow storage unit. It was a physical manifestation of how they viewed this place, a dumpster for their excess. I documented everything, the boxes, the labels with Clara's name, the way they were carelessly stacked against the antique globes. As I was taking a video of a particularly damning pile of discarded electronics, my phone buzzed in my hand. Then it buzzed again, and again, a rapid-fire staccato that signaled a digital assault. I opened the screen. A notification from Instagram. Clara W. has tagged you in a post. I clicked it. It was a photo of Clara and my father, sitting at a bistro table, looking somber. Clara was wearing oversized sunglasses, wiping a fake tear. The caption read, "Heartbroken today. Trying to hold the family together while dealing with difficult decisions. It is so hard when siblings care more about money than family legacy. Praying for peace and unity. Family first struggles sad." I felt a dry, humorless laugh bubble up in my throat. She was preempting the narrative. She was painting me as the greedy antagonist before I had even refused the deal. She was inoculating their social circle against the truth. Then came the text messages. The flying monkeys had been deployed. Aunt Linda. Sophie, your dad sounds so stressed. Please don't be difficult about the house. It is just a building. Cousin Mike. Heard you are holding out for a payday. Not cool. Soph, Uncle Rob has done everything for you. My mother, finally chiming in. We are all waiting for you to do the right thing. Sophie, don't ruin the family dinner. Just come home and sign. The pressure was suffocating. It was designed to be. It was a coordinated attack on my conscience, designed to make me feel small, selfish, and isolated. A younger Sophie would have crumbled. She would have texted back apologies. She would have driven straight to the estate, weeping, begging for forgiveness, and signed away her birthright just to stop the notifications. But I was not that Sophie anymore. I was the mountain grandma told me to be. I did not reply to a single message. I did not like the post. I did not comment. Instead, I took a screenshot of Clara's post. I took screenshots of the texts. I organized them into a folder on my phone labeled coercion. I walked back to the front door. I paused at the threshold, looking back at the peeling wallpaper and the humidifiers. They want a liability, I whispered to the empty house. I will give them one. I stepped out onto the porch and pulled the heavy door shut. The lock clicked with a satisfying finality. I walked down the steps, the sun beginning to dip below the tree line, casting long, sharp shadows across the yard. I had the evidence of the fraud. I had the evidence of the emotional manipulation. I had the financial records proving their insolvency. I was not just going to refuse to sign. That was too passive. I was going to sign. I was going to walk into that dinner tonight, play the role of the beaten dog, and sign the document. But I was going to sign the document that David was currently drafting, the one that swapped the pages, the one that looked identical but stripped them of every protection they thought they had. They wanted to trap me in a lie? Fine, I would trap them in the truth. I got back into my car. The engine roared to life. I checked my reflection in the mirror one last time. I looked calm. I looked resigned. I practiced the sad, defeated smile I would wear when I walked into my father's dining room. Okay, Grandma, I said to the rearview mirror. Let's go get some respect. I put the car in drive and headed toward the lion's den, carrying the only weapon that mattered, the absolute refusal to be afraid of them anymore. The grateful daughter was coming to dinner, and she was bringing an appetite for justice. The library doors were closed when I arrived, but this time, I did not hesitate. I did not stand outside listening. I knocked once, a soft, timid rap that barely made a sound against the heavy oak, and pushed the door open. My father, Robert Whitaker, sat behind his desk. It was a massive slab of mahogany that he used like a barricade. To his right sat my mother, Diane, looking at a spot on the carpet as if she were trying to telepathically clean a stain, and lounging on the leather sofa, swirling a glass of red wine, was Clara. They looked up as I entered. The air in the room was sucked out instantly, replaced by a vacuum of tension. Sophie, my father said. He did not stand up. He did not smile. He gestured to the single wooden chair placed in the center of the room, facing the desk. It looked like an interrogation chair. Sit down. I walked forward, keeping my steps small and hesitant. I let my shoulders slump forward, rounding my posture to look smaller, less significant. I clutched my purse to my chest like a shield. Hi, Dad, Mom, Clara, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You are late," Clara said, taking a sip of her wine. "We have been waiting for 20 minutes, but I guess when you do not have a real job, time is just a suggestion." "Clara," my father warned. Though his tone lacked any real reprimand, he turned his cold, blue eyes onto me. "We have a lot to get through. Sophie, I trust you have thought about what we discussed. About Cedar Hollow?" I nodded slowly. It is a lot to process." My father sighed, the sound of a man burdened by the incompetence of others. He slid a thick stack of papers across the desk toward me. On top of the stack sat a check. I looked at it. It was made out to Sophie Love. The amount was written in bold, black ink, $50,000. "This is the solution, Sophie," my father said, leaning forward, clasping his hands. "I have spoken to my advisors. The property is in ruins. The foundation is cracking. There is black mold in the dining room that is a severe health hazard. The taxes are due next month, and the insurance premiums have tripled. If you keep that house, it will bankrupt you within a year." I looked at the check, then up at him. I widened my eyes, feigning fear. "Bankrupt me?" "Completely," he said. "But we are family, and because we are family, I am willing to take that burden from you. I will absorb the costs, handle the demolition or the repairs, and deal with the legal headaches. In exchange, you sign over your interest in the trust and the property, and you walk away with this." He tapped the check. $50,000, he said. "Do you know how long it would take you to earn that with whatever it is you do? 5 years? 10? "It is a lot of money," I whispered. "It is a lifeline," Clara chimed in. She stood up and walked over to me, circling my chair like a shark. She looked me up and down, her lip curling in disgust at my off-the-rack blazer and scuffed boots. "Look at you, Sophie. You look exhausted. You look like you are barely holding it together. Take the money, buy some decent clothes, get a facial, maybe move out of whatever rat hole you are living in. Stop pretending you can handle a legacy like Cedar Hollow. You can barely handle your own hair." "Clara is right," my mother said softly. It was the first time she had spoken. "We just want you to be safe, Sophie. We want you to be secure." I looked at my mother. Her eyes were pleading, but I saw the fear behind them. She knew. She knew they were broke. She knew this was a robbery, but she was too terrified of losing her country club membership to warn me. "So," I said, my voice trembling, "if I sign this, the house is yours? And I never have to worry about the mold?" "Never," my father said. "I take care of everything. Just sign the papers." He pushed a silver pen toward me. I reached out and took the document. It was heavy. "Deed of transfer and release of beneficiary rights." It read in bold letters. Can I read it?" I asked. My father checked his watch. "Sophie, it is standard legalese. We have a dinner reservation at 7. We do not have time for you to parse through every wherefore and heretofore. My lawyers drafted it. It is standard." "I know," I said, looking down. I want to make sure I do not do anything wrong. I am so bad with this stuff." "We know," Clara sneered. "That is why we are doing it for you. Just sign the damn paper." "Please," I said, looking at my father. "Just a quick look? I brought a folder to keep it in. I like to be organized." I placed my large leather tote bag on the edge of the desk. I fumbled with the zipper, my hands shaking theatrically. I pulled out a manila folder. "Fine," my father snapped. "Read the summary page, but hurry up." I opened the document. I pretended to read, moving my lips silently as if sounding out the words. In reality, my mind was racing with the precision of a diamond cutter. The document was 20 pages long. The crucial clause, the one David and I had discussed, was on page 7. In my father's version, page 7 stated that I waived all rights to audit the trust and accepted the $50,000 as full and final settlement for an asset valued at unspecified. In my bag, hidden inside the manila folder I had just placed on the desk, was a replica of page 7. David had printed it on the exact same bond paper, The font was identical, the margins were identical, but the text was different. In my version, the clause stated that I transferred the physical property of Cedar Hollow to Robert Whitaker, but retained a lien on the property equal to its fair market value at the time of sale, and explicitly reserved the right to audit all prior trust transactions. It also contained a clawback provision. If the property was sold within 12 months, 80% of the sale price would revert to the original beneficiary, me. I needed to make the switch. "Oh no," I gasped, and my elbow knocked into the stack of papers. The document slid off the polished desk and scattered onto the floor. "For God's sake, Sophie!" my father shouted. I am so sorry," I cried, dropping to my knees to gather the papers. "Leave it. I will get the maid," Clara said, but I was already scrambling. I was on the floor, shielded from their view by the bulk of the desk. My hands moved with a speed that would have made a magician proud. I gathered their pages. I slid page 7 out. I pulled the replacement page 7 from the folder that had fallen with the rest. I slotted it in. I crumpled the original page 7 into a ball and shoved it up the sleeve of my blazer. It took 4 seconds. I stood up, flushing red, clutching the messy stack of papers. "I am sorry. I am so clumsy." I put the document back on the desk, tapping the edges to straighten it. "You are a disaster," Clara muttered. "Just sign the papers, Sophie," my father said, rubbing his temples. "Stop wasting our time." I sat back down. I picked up the silver pen. I looked at the check again. $50,000. "Dad," I said, looking him in the eye, "are you sure this is fair? I mean, Grandma loved that house." My father leaned forward. His face hardened. The mask of the benevolent patriarch slipped, revealing the desperate, greedy man underneath. "You should be grateful," he said. His voice was low and dangerous. "Most fathers would let you drown. I am throwing you a life raft. You have nothing. Sophie, you are nothing without this family. I am giving you a chance to start over. Do not dare ask me if it is fair. Just say thank you." I held his gaze. I let a single tear roll down my cheek. It was the final touch to the masterpiece of deception. "Okay," I whispered. "Thank you, Dad." I flipped to the signature page. I did not need to swap this one. The signature page just referred to the terms herein. As long as the document was stapled together when it was notarized, which the notary waiting in the hall would do in a moment, the swap was sealed. I pressed the pen to the paper. The ink flowed smooth and black. I signed my name, Sophie Eleanor Love. I pushed the papers back to him. My father snatched them up immediately. He checked the signature. A look of profound relief washed over his face. He actually smiled. It was a terrifying, predatory smile. "Good girl," he said. He picked up the check and flicked it across the table. It fluttered and landed in my lap. "Take it. Go buy yourself a life." "Can I hesitated. "Can I have a copy just for my taxes or my records?" "Marcus will mail you a copy once it is filed," my father said, waving his hand dismissively. He was already organizing the papers, preparing to hand them to his lawyer. He did not notice that page 7 felt slightly crisper than the others. He did not notice anything because he did not think I was capable of outsmarting him. "Okay," I said. I tucked the check into my purse. "I guess I will go now." "Please do," Clara said. "We have a celebration dinner to get to, and honestly, you are not dressed for the venue." I stood up. My legs felt steady. The shaking had stopped the moment the ink dried. "Goodbye, Dad. Goodbye, Mom," I said. My mother looked up, her eyes wet. "Goodbye, Sophie." I walked to the door. I did not look back. I stepped out into the hallway, past the notary who was waiting to go in. "He is ready for you," I told the notary. "He is in a very good hurry." I walked out of the house and into the cool night air. I reached my car and got in. I sat there for a moment in the dark, listening to the silence. I reached up my sleeve and pulled out the crumpled ball of paper, the original page 7. I smoothed it out on the steering wheel. I took a lighter from my glove box, one I kept for emergencies. I rolled down the window. I lit the corner of the page. I watched the fire eat the words wave, release, and forfeit. I watched the lies turn to ash and float away into the wind. My father thought he had just bought a fortune for $50,000. He thought he had severed the limb to save the body. He had no idea that he had just signed his own death warrant. The document he held was now a loaded gun, and he was the one pointing it at his own head. I started the car, I had a check to cash, and I had a war to win. I sat in my sedan, the engine idling, watching the front door of the estate through the darkness. The dashboard clock read 7:45 in the evening. The air inside the car was cool, but my skin felt hot, prickling with the adrenaline of what had just transpired. 2 minutes later, the heavy oak door opened. A man in a gray suit stepped out. Mr. Henderson, the notary public my father had used for 20 years. He carried a leather briefcase, tucked under his arm with the casual indifference of a man who had just witnessed a routine transaction. He walked to his car, a modest sedan parked a few spots away from mine, got in, and drove away. He had no idea. Mr. Henderson had done his job perfectly. He had verified the identities of the signatories. He had watched us sign. He had stamped his seal on the final page. In the eyes of the law, he had consecrated the document. But a notary does not read the terms. A notary does not check for consistency between page 6 and page 7. He certifies the act of signing, not the intent of the content. The trap was now armed. I put my car in gear and rolled slowly down the driveway, keeping my lights off until I hit the main road. I needed to put distance between myself and the house, but my mind was still back in that library, dissecting the document I had just manipulated. The brilliance of the switch lay not in its complexity, but in its banality. The document my father believed he held was a standard quitclaim deed with waiver of interest. It was designed to strip me of any claim to Cedar Hollow House in exchange for the $50,000. It contained language that was aggressive and final, using terms like irrevocable release and forever discharge. The document he actually held, the one that now bore his signature and the notary's seal, was a conditional transfer with reversionary interest. The page I had swapped in, page 7, changed the definition of the transfer as, in my version. The transfer of the title was not absolute. It was conditional upon the buyer, my father, maintaining the property and not encumbering it with debt exceeding 20% of its value. But the real kill switch was the consideration clause. In the original draft, the consideration was the sum of $50,000. In my version, the text read, the sum of $50,000, representing the initial installment of the fair market value, with the remainder to be paid upon any future sale, refinancing, or commercial use of the property. It was a legal landmine, and the reason it was irreversible lay in the integration clause on page 10, a page I had not needed to swap because it was standard boilerplate. This clause stated that this agreement constitutes the entire agreement between the parties and supersedes all prior negotiations, representations, or agreements, either written or oral. By signing the document with my page 7 included, my father had legally agreed that whatever we had discussed verbally, the $50,000 being the only payment, was irrelevant. The written word was God, and the written word now said he owed me the full value of the house the moment he tried to use it. I turned onto the highway, merging into the flow of traffic. The city lights of Columbus glittered in the distance, a sprawling grid of electricity. My father would not check the papers tonight. That was the other variable I had calculated. His arrogance. Robert Whittaker did not proofread executed contracts. He assumed that because he had paid his expensive lawyers to draft the template, and because he had bullied his stupid daughter into signing, the result was a foregone conclusion. He saw me as a variable that had been solved. You do not double-check the math on a problem you have already erased from the board. Furthermore, he was distracted. I knew from the financial records I had stolen that he had a meeting with the bank on Monday morning. He intended to present the Cedar Hollow deed as unencumbered collateral to secure a massive bridge loan to save his other failing investments. He needed the deed recorded immediately. He would hand the stack of papers to his assistant first thing in the morning with instructions to file this with the county clerk, rush service. The assistant wouldn't read it either. She would just check for signatures and the notary stamp. By the time anyone actually read the text of page 7, the deed would be recorded in the public record. The trap would be a matter of state law. And the most satisfying part? He had no defense. If this ever went to court, and it would, my father would try to claim fraud. He would scream that I had tricked him, but the law is cruel to experts. If I were a grandmother being scammed by a predator, a judge might show leniency, but Robert Whitaker was a real estate tycoon with 30 years of experience. He was a sophisticated party, in the eyes of the court. He had a duty to read. He had had every opportunity to inspect the document before signing. He had sat right there. He had held the pen. He could not stand before a judge and say, "Your Honor, I did not read the contract because I assumed I was successfully ripping off my daughter." His own expertise was the padlock on his cell. I reached for my phone, which was mounted on the dashboard, and dialed David. It was late, but I knew he would be awake. "Did you do it?" he asked the moment the line connected. No pleasantries. "It is done," I said. My voice was steady, devoid of the tremor that had been there an hour ago. He signed. The notary stamped it. It is in his possession. "Did he look at the pages?" "No," I said. "He was too busy telling me how grateful I should be." "Standard narcissist behavior," David said. "Okay, now we wait. Do not spend the check." "I know," I said. "Whatever I spend, I have to be able to pay back if he tries to rescind the deal based on mutual mistake, though that is a long shot." "It is not a mutual mistake," David corrected. "It is a unilateral mistake on his part. You knew exactly what you were signing. He was the one who was negligent. But you are right. Keep the cash liquid. We might need it for legal fees when the bomb goes off." "When does the bomb go off?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Monday," David said. "When he tries to leverage the property, the bank's due diligence team will pull the recorded deed. They will see the reversionary interest clause. They will see that he does not own the house free and clear. They will deny the loan." "And then?" "And then he collapses," David said simply. "Without that loan, his other notes get called. It will be a domino effect. By Wednesday, he will be insolvent." I drove in silence for a moment, letting the weight of that sink in. I was not just reclaiming my grandmother's house. I was dismantling the empire my father had built on smoke and mirrors. I was doing what the market should have done years ago, correcting a failure. "There is one more thing," David said. "The Exhibit B you mentioned, the appraisal." "I have it," I said. "I took photos of the humidifiers and the fake damage before I left. If he tries to claim the house was worthless to justify the low price, I can prove he was manufacturing the depreciation." "Good," David said. "You are learning. Sophie, you are becoming dangerous." "I had good teachers," I said. "They taught me that love is conditional and survival is a zero-sum game." "Go to the hotel," David said. "Turn off your phone. Sleep. You have earned it." "I can't turn off my phone," I said. "Not yet. I have to play the part for one more day." "Why?" "Because tomorrow is the gala," I said. "The Success in Business charity dinner. He is going to announce the restructuring of his assets. He is going to brag about saving the family legacy." "And you are going?" "I have to," I said. "If I disappear now, he gets suspicious. I have to go. I have to stand there in the back of the room and clap. I have to let him think he has won until the very last second." "That is cold." "Sophie," David said, and I could hear a smile in his voice. "It is necessary," I replied. I hung up the phone. I was back on the outskirts of the city now. I pulled into the parking lot of the Holiday Inn Express. It was a far cry from the marble floors of the estate, but tonight it felt like a fortress. I parked the car and turned off the ignition. I sat in the dark for a long time. I reached into my purse and pulled out the check. $50,000. It was a lot of money to most people. To my father, it was pocket change, a bribe to make a problem go away. He thought he had bought my silence. He thought he had bought my compliance. He did not realize that $50,000 was just the admission price to the show I was about to put on. I looked at the signature on the check. Robert Whittaker. The loops were large and flamboyant. The signature of a man who loved to see his name on things. I put the check back in my purse. I went up to my room. I did not turn on the lights. I walked to the window and looked out at the highway. Somewhere out there, my father and Clara were at a celebratory dinner, drinking vintage wine, toasting to their own brilliance. They were laughing about how easy it had been. They were mocking my bad clothes and my timid voice. They were unaware that the ground beneath them had already been mined. I undressed in the dark and lay down on the stiff hotel sheets. I closed my eyes, but I did not sleep. I played the scene in the library over and over in my head. The scratch of the pen on paper, the notary's stamp thumping down, the sound of the fire eating the original page 7. It was perfect. It was legal. It was binding. Tomorrow, they would throw a party, and on Monday, the hangover would begin. But for now, I lay in the silence, a soldier waiting for the dawn of the final battle, feeling the strange, heavy peace of a person who has finally decided to stop running and start fighting. The gala was held in the grand ballroom of the Whittaker estate, a room my father had spent $200,000 renovating just last year. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the vaulted ceiling, casting a fractured, diamond-bright light over the crowd. The air smelled of expensive perfume, truffle oil, and the metallic tang of aggressive ambition. I stood in the shadow of a massive marble pillar near the caterer's entrance, holding a glass of sparkling water that I had no intention of drinking. I was wearing a black dress. It was silk, floor-length, and tailored to within an inch of its life. It was elegant, severe, and cost $3,000. I had paid for it with the first withdrawal from the $50,000 check my father had thrown at me. Technically, I was wearing his money. It felt like armor. My father, Robert Whittaker, stood at the center of the room, holding court. He looked magnificent in his bespoke tuxedo, his face flushed with the intoxicated glow of a man who believes he has just pulled off the heist of the century. He was surrounded by the city's elite, bankers, developers, local politicians, all laughing at his jokes, all desperate to be close to the Whittaker magic. They had no idea that the magic was just smoke, and the smoke was about to clear. "Ladies and gentlemen," my father's voice boomed over the microphone system, cutting through the din of the string quartet. The room fell silent. If I could have a moment. He raised his champagne glass. The light caught the crystal, creating a starburst effect. "Tonight is about the future," he announced, beaming. "As many of you know, Whittaker Holdings has been undergoing a strategic realignment. We have shed the dead weight. We have streamlined our assets, and come Monday morning, we will be finalizing a deal that will secure our dominance in the commercial sector for the next 20 years. Applause rippled through the room. Polite, envious applause. "But," he continued, his voice dropping to a register of mock humility that made my stomach churn, "business is nothing without family, and family means making hard choices. It means protecting the weaker members of the pack." He turned and pointed a finger toward the back of the room. A spotlight, clearly prearranged, swung around and blinded me. I did not flinch. I did not shield my eyes. I stood perfectly still, letting the light wash over me. "My daughter, Sophie," he said, his tone dripping with patronizing sweetness. "Sophie has always been a free spirit, a dreamer, the realities of asset management, of property taxes, of legacy maintenance. They were just too heavy for her. So, this week, we stepped in. We relieved her of those burdens so she could pursue her simpler passions." A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. It was low, cruel, and knowing. They saw me as the charity case, the failed heir, the girl who had to be bought out because she was too incompetent to function. "To Sophie," my father toasted, raising his glass higher. "May she find happiness in a life that fits her size." To Sophie, the crowd echoed. I saw Clara standing near the stage. She was holding her phone up, streaming live to her 50,000 followers. She turned the camera toward me, zooming in. I could see her mouthing commentary to her audience. Look at her. So awkward. Dad is a saint for dealing with her. I did not look away. I stared straight at my father. I offered him a small, tight smile. It was the smile of a person watching a man light a cigar in a room filled with gas. He took a sip of his champagne, looking satisfied. He turned back to the crowd, ready to launch into the second part of his speech about his genius vision for the Cedar Hollow property. And then it happened. It started with a single sound, ping, a notification on a phone near the front of the stage. Then another, buzz. Then 3 more, ding, ding, ping. It was a cascade. Within 10 seconds, the room was filled with the discordant symphony of digital alerts. It sounded like a swarm of mechanical locusts descending on the feast. The guests, conditioned by their professions to react instantly to market news, reached into their pockets and purses. The laughter died. The clinking of glasses stopped. The only sound was the rustle of silk and the tapping of thumbs on screens. I watched the face of the man standing closest to my father, Mr. Sterling, the president of the regional bank that was supposed to underwrite my father's loan on Monday. Mr. Sterling looked at his phone. His eyebrows shot up. His face went pale, then red. He looked up at my father, not with admiration, but with the sharp, terrified look of a man realizing he is handcuffed to a corpse. My father frowned. Is everything all right? Please, silence your devices. We are... Robert, Mr. Sterling said. His voice was not loud, but in the sudden silence of the ballroom, it carried like a gunshot. Is this true? Is what true? My father asked, his smile faltering. The article, a woman in a red dress said, holding up her phone. The Financial Times just pushed a breaking alert. Whitaker Holdings under investigation for insolvency and embezzlement via shell companies. My father froze. That is ridiculous. It is a rumor. It is slander. It has receipts, Bob, another man said, scrolling frantically. They have PDFs. They have wire transfers. Hundreds of thousands of dollars moving to an Orion Consulting in Miami. Listings of personal debts disguised as corporate liability. The atmosphere in the room did not just shift, it shattered. The social elite of the city were predators, but they were terrified of contagion. If Robert Whitaker was toxic, standing near him was a liability. The physical space around my father began to expand as people instinctively took a step back. This is a mistake, my father shouted, his voice cracking. My finances are impeccable. We are liquidating a major asset on Monday. The Cedar Hollow estate. Oh. The article mentions that too. Clara's voice cut in. She was staring at her phone screen, but she wasn't looking at the news. She was looking at the comments on her live stream. Dad, Clara whispered, her voice trembling. The comments. People are posting links to the public registry. They are saying the house isn't yours. Of course it is mine, my father roared. He looked wild now, the sweat starting to bead on his forehead. She signed it. Sophie signed it. He pointed at me again, but the spotlight had died. I was just a silhouette in the darkness now. Sophie, he screamed across the room. Tell them you sold it to me. I did not answer. I simply took a sip of my water. It was cool and clean. The guests were now whispering furiously. The word fraud was being hissed from corner to corner. Mr. Sterling was already typing an email, likely instructing his risk management team to kill the loan deal before business hours opened on Monday. Clara, in her panic, had forgotten to stop recording. She had turned the camera around to face her father, capturing his meltdown in high-definition 4K resolution. My father lunged toward Mr. Sterling. Jim, listen to me. This is a hack. It is a setup. The deal is solid. Don't touch me, Robert, Sterling snapped, recoiling. If half of this is true, you are going to prison. I cannot be seen with you. Sterling turned and walked toward the exit. That was the signal. The herd moved. Dozens of guests began to stream toward the doors, murmuring apologies, checking their watches, claiming sudden emergencies. They fled the sinking ship with practiced efficiency. My mother sat down on the edge of the stage, her face gray, clutching her pearl necklace as if it were the only thing keeping her head attached to her body. Clara stood alone in the center of the dance floor, holding her phone. She looked at the screen, reading the deluge of mockery and shock rolling in from the internet. She looked lost. She looked like a child who had just realized the playground was built on quicksand. Then, slowly, she turned the camera back toward the back of the room. She was looking for someone to blame. She was looking for me. The lens focused on me. I stood alone near the pillar. The crowd had parted around me. I was the only person in the room who was perfectly still. I looked directly into the lens of Clara's phone. I looked past the plastic and glass, straight into the digital void where thousands of strangers were watching the House of Whittaker crumble in real time. I did not smile. I did not gloat. I simply raised my glass slightly, a silent toast to the truth. Then I turned around. I walked out the catering exit, the heavy door clicking shut behind me, muffling the sounds of my father screaming at his fleeing friends. The party was over, but the reckoning had just begun. I did not make it to the parking lot. I had barely reached the marble expanse of the main foyer when the double doors of the ballroom burst open behind me. The sound was violent, echoing off the high ceilings like a crack of thunder. "Sophie, you get back here!" My father's voice was a ragged tear in the sophisticated silence of the hallway. I stopped. I did not turn around immediately. I took a slow breath, centering myself, feeling the silk of my dress cool against my skin. I could hear the stampede of footsteps, not just his, but the sharp clicks of heels and the scuff of dress shoes. The audience had followed the drama. They were hungry for blood, and they did not care whose it was. I turned slowly. Robert Whittaker was storming toward me, his face a mottled map of red rage and white panic. Behind him, Clara was practically running, her phone still raised, her thumb flying across the screen as she tried to moderate the disaster unfolding in her comment section. And behind them, a phalanx of stunned guests and potential investors hovered, morbidly curious. "You ungrateful child," my father hissed, stopping 3 feet from me. He was breathing hard. "You set this up. That article. The leaks. You did this." "I did nothing but attend a party I was invited to," I said calmly. "You are going to go back in there," he demanded, pointing a shaking finger at the ballroom. "You are going to take that microphone. You are going to tell them that the insolvency rumors are false. You are going to tell them that the Cedar Hollow deal is solid and that the funds are already in transit." "But I cannot do that, Dad," I said, "because that would be a lie." "It is not a lie," he screamed. "I have the deed. I have the asset." "Actually," a deep voice cut through the tension from the edge of the crowd, "I do not think she is the one lying. Robert." The crowd parted. A man stepped forward. He was tall, wearing a tuxedo that cost more than my father's car, with silver hair and eyes that looked like chipped flint. It was Julian Vance. My father's jaw dropped. Julian Vance was a venture capital legend, a man who moved markets with a single tweet. He was the kind of whale my father spent his entire life trying to harpoon, but never could get a meeting with. He had come tonight as a favor to a mutual acquaintance, and my father had spent the first hour of the party trying to corner him. "Mr. Vance," my father stammered, his aggression evaporating instantly into sycophancy. "I apologize for this scene. My daughter she is unwell. She is confused." Julian Vance ignored my father completely. He walked straight up to me. He stopped and looked at me with a mixture of amusement and respect. "I thought it was you," Vance said. "The lighting in there was terrible, but the posture gave it away. You stand exactly the same way when you are destroying a competitor in a boardroom." My father let out a nervous, high-pitched laugh. "Boardroom? Mr. Vance, you must be mistaken. Sophie works in, well, she does vague computer repair. She is very simple. Vance turned his head slowly to look at my father. The look was withering. Simple? Vance repeated. Robert, this is Sophie Love. She is the founder and CEO of Veritas Systems. She wrote the Sentinel protocol that half the banks in this room used to secure their transactions, including yours, I imagine. The silence that fell over the foyer was absolute. It was heavier than the silence in the ballroom had been. This was the silence of a paradigm shifting violently. Veritas? Clara squeaked. She lowered her phone. That is a unicorn company. It was valued at $40 million last quarter. $60 million, Vance corrected her, looking back at me. As of this morning's trading, nice work on the interface update. By the way, Sophie. Thank you, Julian, I said, my voice dropping its timid facade. I stood to my full height. We try. My father looked at me. He looked at Vance. He looked back at me. His brain was misfiring, trying to reconcile the image of the slow, broke daughter with the reality of the tech mogul standing in front of him. Then, the greed kicked in. I saw it happen. It washed over his panic like a soothing balm. His eyes widened. His posture straightened. He realized that if I was worth $60 million, then he was worth $60 million. Because in his mind, I belonged to him. Sophie, he gasped, stepping forward, his arms opening wide. My God, why did you not tell us? A CEO, my brilliant girl. I always knew you had it in you. I always told your mother. Sophie is the quiet genius. Didn't I, Diane? My mother, who had just caught up to the group, nodded furiously, looking terrified. Come here, my father said, moving to hug me. We can fix this. We can issue a joint press release. Whitaker family unites to dominate the market, with your capital and my experience. I took one step back. Do not touch me, I said. The command was not loud, but it was absolute. It froze him in his tracks. Sophie, honey, he cajoled, his smile faltering. Don't be like that. We are family. We help each other. I just gave you $50,000. Remember? I helped you. You tried to rob me, I corrected him. Rob you? He laughed, looking around at the crowd for support. I bought a dilapidated house from you to save you from debt. I was generous. The house is not dilapidated, Dad, I said, and you did not buy it. I have the papers. He reached into the inside pocket of his tuxedo jacket. He pulled out the folded document we had signed only 2 hours ago. He waved it in the air like a flag. Signed, sealed, and notarized. The Cedar Hollow estate is mine. Clara perked up. Yes, he owns it. And if Sophie is rich, she doesn't need the money, so the deal is even better. I looked at the document in his hand. Read it, I said. I know what it says, he scoffed. Read page 7, I said. The consideration clause. It says $50,000, he snapped. Read it aloud, I challenged. Or are you afraid that your expensive lawyers missed something? The crowd was watching him. Julian Vance was watching him with a shark-like grin. My father felt the pressure. He huffed, unfolded the document, and flipped aggressively to page 7. Here, he spat. Consideration. The buyer agrees to pay the seller the sum of $50,000. He stopped. His eyes squinted. He pulled the paper closer to his face. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. Read the rest, Robert, I said. He did not speak. He was reading it silently, his face draining of all color until he looked like a wax figure melting under the heat of the foyer lights. Read it, I shouted, my voice echoing off the marble. My father swallowed hard. His voice came out as a whisper. Representing the initial installment of the fair market value, with the remainder to be paid upon any future sale, refinancing, or commercial use of the property. A gasp went through the crowd. What does that mean? Clara asked, her voice shrill. What is the remainder? It means, I said, stepping toward them, that you did not buy the house for $50,000. You made a down payment, and the moment you try to use that house as collateral for your loan on Monday, You trigger the clause. You will owe me the full market value immediately. 1.2 million, Julian Vance murmured, roughly. But, my father stammered. But we agreed. You said, the integration clause on page 10 says that verbal agreements are irrelevant, I said. The written contract supersedes everything. You signed it. Dad, you, the great businessman, you, the expert. You signed a contract that makes me your primary creditor. This is fraud, he shrieked. You tricked me. I gave you a document, I said coldly. You had every opportunity to read it. You chose not to because you were too busy telling me how stupid I was. You were too busy gloating about how you were stripping me of my inheritance for pennies on the dollar. Clara grabbed the paper from his hand. She stared at it, her eyes filling with tears. But if we owe her $1 million, and the accounts are frozen because of the investigation, then you are insolvent, I finished for her. My father looked at me. The love, the fake pride, the manipulation, it all fell away. All that was left was pure, unadulterated hatred. You bitch, he whispered. You ungrateful little... I am grateful. I interrupted him. I am grateful that Grandma taught me to read before I sign. I am grateful that I built my own empire so I never had to depend on your crumbling one. And I am very, very grateful that I will never have to sit at your dinner table again. I turned to the crowd. Enjoy the rest of the evening, I said. I believe the bar is still open, even if the Whitaker credit line is not. I walked toward the main doors. Julian Vance stepped aside, giving me a slight bow as I passed. Call me, Sophie, he said. We should do lunch. Have your people call my people. Julian, I said, not breaking stride. I pushed open the heavy front doors and stepped out into the night. The air was crisp and cold. Behind me, I could hear the sounds of shouting, the frantic questions of investors, and the sobbing of my sister. It was the most beautiful music I had ever heard. The valet stand was a flurry of activity, but it was the frantic, hushed kind of activity that happens when a building is burning, and everyone is trying to exit through a single door without acknowledging the smoke. I handed my ticket to the young attendant, his eyes wide as he recognized me from the scene inside. He did not say a word, just sprinted off to retrieve my sedan. I stood on the curb, the night air biting at my exposed arms, but I did not shiver. I felt a strange, feverish warmth radiating from my chest. It was the heat of a bridge burning, and I was the one holding the match. Sophie, you cannot just walk away. The doors behind me banged open again. My father stumbled out, followed closely by Clara and my mother. The facade was gone. His tuxedo jacket was unbuttoned, his tie loosened as if he were suffocating. He looked less like a tycoon and more like a man who had been mugged in an alley. A dozen guests were waiting for their cars nearby. They stopped talking. They did not pretend to look away this time. The social contract of polite ignorance had been suspended. They watched, hungry for the crash. I can walk away, Dad, I said, not turning fully to face him. I have my own car. Unlike you, I actually own the title to mine. We need to talk, he panted, stopping a few feet away. He lowered his voice, trying to regain some semblance of control, but the panic vibrated in his throat. Inside. Private. Now. There is nothing private about this family anymore, I said, gesturing to Clara. My sister was standing by the large stone lion statue, her phone still raised. She looked shell-shocked, staring at the screen. The comments were scrolling so fast they were a blur of neon text. Clara, I said, my voice cutting through the night air. Read the top comment, the one with the most likes. Clara looked up, her eyes wet and confused. She looked at the phone. She hesitated. Read it, I commanded. It says, Clara's voice wavered. It says, the reversionary clause means he just sold a $1.2 million asset for a $50,000 loan. He is not just broke, he is incompetent. Whitaker crash. My father flinched as if he had been slapped. The number, 1.2 million, hung in the air. It was the price tag of his arrogance. It is not incompetence, he hissed at me. It was a trick. You hid the terms. I hid nothing, I said, turning to face the crowd of onlookers. I raised my voice slightly, ensuring that Julian Vance, who was waiting for his limousine a few yards away, could hear me. The document stated clearly that the $50,000 was an initial installment. It stated that full market value was due upon commercial use. You were so eager to steal from me, so eager to believe I was a fool, that you signed your own bankruptcy decree. We are family, my mother wailed. Finally stepping forward, she reached out a hand, her diamond bracelets catching the light. Sophie, please, your father, the bank. If they see this, they will pull everything. We will lose the estate. We will lose the cars. We will lose our standing. I looked at my mother. For years, I had waited for her to protect me. I had waited for her to tell my father to stop calling me useless. I had waited for her to be a mother, but she was just a mirror, reflecting his narcissism back at him to keep him calm. You are not losing your standing, Mom, I said coldly. You lost that the moment you tried to cheat your own daughter to pay for your country club dues. Sophie, listen, my father said, changing tactics. He tried to smile. It was a gruesome, desperate thing. Okay, you won. You proved your point. You are the CEO of Veritas. You have resources. We can work this out. You can cover the loan. We can tear up that deed, and you can write a check to stabilize the company. An investment. We will call it an investment. The audacity was breathtaking. Even now, standing in the ruins of his own making, he saw me as a wallet. An investment implies a return, I said. You are a liability. I am your father, he shouted, the smile vanishing. And I am the CEO of a publicly traded company, I replied. And as a CEO, I have a fiduciary duty to cut losses. You are a bad asset, Robert. I took a step closer to him. The guests leaned in. The silence was absolute. So here's the new reality, I said. There will be no check. There will be no bailouts. There will be no covering of your debts. I am terminating all implied financial support effective immediately. If you need money, I suggest you sell the Range Rover. Or perhaps Clara can sell her handbag collection. I hear there is a good resale market for vintage Chanel. Clara let out a sob, clutching her purse protectively. You cannot do this, my father whispered. People are watching. Yes, I said, looking around at the faces of his former friends, his business rivals, his social circle. They are watching, and they are learning. They are learning that the Whitaker name is worthless. I saw Mr. Sterling, the banker, standing near the valet stand. He caught my eye. He gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod, then turned his back on my father. It was a subtle movement, but it was the signal. One by one, the guests turned away. They checked their phones. They started conversations with each other, pointedly ignoring the man screaming in the driveway. The circle of influence that my father had spent 40 years building evaporated in 40 seconds. He was not being attacked. He was being deleted. My car pulled up. The valet jumped out and held the door open. Sophie! My father lunged forward, grabbing my arm. His grip was hard, painful. You walk away now, and you are dead to us. Do you hear me? Dead. I looked down at his hand on my arm. Then I looked up at his eyes. Dad, I said softly, I have been dead to you for 10 years. I just finally decided to stop haunting this house. I pulled my arm free. He was too weak to hold on. He stumbled back, unbalanced by the loss of control. I got into the driver's seat. The leather was cold. I placed my purse on the passenger seat, the purse that still held the check for $50,000. I started the engine. I did not roll down the window. I did not look at my mother crying into her hands. I did not look at Clara, who was now screaming at her phone as the comments turned on her. I looked straight ahead, put the car in drive, and pressed the accelerator. As I drove down the long, winding driveway, watching the lights of the estate fade in the rearview mirror, I felt a profound, heavy silence settle over me. It was not the silence of loneliness. It was the silence of a debt being paid in full. But as I turned onto the main road, my phone buzzed on the dashboard. It was a text from David. "The deed is recorded. The bank has been notified. But Sophie, watch your back. The rat is cornered, but he still has teeth. Check your email." I frowned. I kept driving, the road stretching out before me like a dark ribbon. I had won the battle at the party. I had humiliated them. I had stripped them of their pride and their future financing. But my father was a man who believed the rules did not apply to him. He would not just accept defeat. He would try to burn the board. The story wasn't over. The public execution was finished. But the legal war was just beginning, and I had a feeling that before the sun came up, Robert Whitaker would try one last, desperate gambit to destroy me. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. Let him try. I had $50,000 of his money and $60 million of my own. I was ready for the fire. Monday morning arrived with the gray, relentless drizzle typical of the Midwest in late autumn, matching the mood of a city that had spent the weekend gossiping about the implosion of the Whitaker family. I sat in my corner office on the 42nd floor of the Veritas Systems building. The walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a panoramic view of Columbus, a city my father had once claimed to own. My desk was clean, save for a single tablet and a cup of black coffee. The silence here was different from the silence at Cedar Hollow or the hotel. It was the silence of power. At 8 o'clock sharp, the intercom buzzed. "David is here," my assistant said. "Send him in." David walked in, looking more like a rumpled detective than a high-priced forensic accountant. He was holding a thick blue folder. He did not sit down. He tossed the folder onto my desk. "You were right," David said. "The rat didn't just try to trap you. He was already caught in a trap of his own making, and he tried to use your house as the bait to gnaw his leg off." I picked up the folder. "What did you find?" "It is called a cross-collateralization clause," David explained, pacing the room. "I dug into the county clerk's backlog this morning, looking for anything pending that hadn't been digitized yet. I found a lien filing from 6 months ago." I opened the file. The document was a loan agreement between Whitaker Holdings and a private equity firm called Ironclad Capital. It was a high-risk, short-term loan for $400,000 with an interest rate that bordered on usury. "He borrowed $400,000, I said, reading the terms. "But 6 months ago, he did not own Cedar Hollow. I did." "Exactly," David said. "Look at the collateral exhibit." I flipped the page. There it was. Exhibit A, real property located at 124 Cedar Hollow Lane. My blood ran cold. "He pledged my house? How? He didn't have the title." "He forged a letter of intent," David said grimly. He showed Ironclad a document, which I assume he drafted himself, stating that you had already agreed to transfer the title to him pending a family restructuring, and that the transfer was merely a formality waiting on a court date. He used that fake promise to secure the cash. It is wire fraud. It is bank fraud. It is about 5 different kinds of felonies. I stared at the signature at the bottom of the loan agreement. Robert Whitaker. "And now?" I asked. "Now," David said, stopping his pacing. "Ironclad Capital has seen the news. They know he is insolvent. They know the deed was finally transferred to him on Friday, legally. Their lien has now attached to the property because he officially owns it. They are going to foreclose. They don't care about your reversionary interest or your family drama. They just want their $400,000 back. They will seize the house, auction it off, and you will lose Cedar Hollow to a stranger." I closed the folder. The anger I felt was cold and sharp. My father had not just tried to steal the house. He had risked throwing it into the wood chipper of a predatory lender just to buy himself a few more months of luxury. "I cannot let them auction it," I said. "Then you have to act fast," David said. "Ironclad is preparing the notice of default as we speak. Once they file it, the clock starts." I tapped my finger on the desk. I looked out at the city. I thought about Grandma Eleanor. I thought about the library full of Clara's discarded boxes. "David," I said, "get Ironclad on the phone." "You want to negotiate?" "No," I said. "I want to buy the paper." David raised an eyebrow. You want to buy your father's debt? If Ironclad forecloses, I have to fight a third party for my home. I explained. If I buy the loan, I become the lender. I become the one holding the lien. I step into their shoes. They will want a premium, David warned. They know you are the CEO of Veritas. They will smell money. I don't care, I said. Offer them full face value plus 5% for immediate assignment of the note. Tell them they can wash their hands of the Whitaker toxic waste today. Wire transfer within the hour. David smiled. It was a shark's smile. I will make the call. 45 minutes later, the deal was done. It cost me $420,000. It was a sickening amount of money to spend on my father's mistakes, but it was necessary. The digital signatures were exchanged. The wire transfer cleared. At 10:30 in the morning, Veritas Systems, through a subsidiary holding company I controlled, officially became the owner of the debt secured by Cedar Hollow House. I was no longer just the daughter he had scammed. I was the bank he owed money to. Draft the notice, I told my legal counsel. A sharp woman named Elena, who had been sitting quietly in the corner during the transaction. Notice of default and acceleration. Demand full payment of the $400,000 immediately due to breach of contract regarding the solvency representations. He doesn't have the money, Elena noted. I know, I said. That is the point. The notification went out via courier and email at noon. At 12:15, my office phone rang. It was an internal line. Ms. Love, the receptionist said, I have a Robert Whitaker on the line. He is screaming. He says it is a family emergency. Put him through, I said. I put the phone on speaker and leaned back in my chair. Sophie! His voice was a distorted screech of panic. What is this? I just got an email from Ironclad. They said they sold my loan. They said you bought it? Hello, Dad, I said calm. Yes, I did. You bought my debt? He sounded like he was choking. Why? Why would you do that? Because you pledged my grandmother's house as collateral for a loan you had no intention of paying, I said. Ironclad was going to foreclose. I decided to cut out the middleman. Sophie, listen to me, he stammered. You have to stop this. You cannot foreclose on your own father. It is immoral. It is sick. We are flesh and blood. We are debtor and creditor, I corrected him. You borrowed money. You lied to get it. Now the note is due. I don't have $400,000, he shouted. You know I don't. The bank froze everything this morning. Mr. Sterling won't take my calls. That sounds like a liquidity problem, I said. The contract you signed with Ironclad states that upon default, the lender has the right to take possession of the secured asset, that is Cedar Hollow. You cannot take the house, he cried. I just got it. It is my only asset. It is the only thing I have left to leverage. It is not an asset, Dad, I said. It is a liability. You told me that yourself on Friday, remember? You said I should be grateful you were taking it off my hands. Sophie, please. His voice broke into a sob. I am begging you, don't do this. Think about your mother. Think about Clara. If we lose the house, we have nothing. We will be on the street. Do you want that on your conscience? Do you want to be the daughter who destroyed her family for money? I closed my eyes for a second. The guilt was there. A faint, programmed reflex from 30 years of conditioning. But then I remembered the $50,000 check. I remembered the humidifiers in the dining room. I remembered him calling me simple to Julian Vance. I am not destroying the family, Dad, I said. I am just processing the paperwork you created. You built this machine. I am just the operator. I will sue you, he threatened, pivoting instantly from sorrow to rage. I will tell the press you are vindictive. I will tell them you hacked my accounts. I would not recommend that, I said coolly. If you sue, I will introduce the forged letter of intent you gave Ironclad into evidence. That is a federal crime. Dad, do you want to lose the house, or do you want to lose your freedom? Because if we go to court, you leave in handcuffs. The silence on the other end was heavy and terrified. He knew I had him. He knew that for the first time in his life, he could not bully, charm, or bribe his way out of the room. "What do you want?" he whispered. "I want the keys," I said, "and I want you out." "It takes months to foreclose," he said, trying to find a foothold. "The law gives me time, eviction protection." "Normally, yes," I said, "but the loan agreement you signed with Ironclad includes a confession of judgment clause for commercial borrowers. You waived your right to a trial. You waived your right to notice. I can file for immediate possession tomorrow." "You are a monster," he spat. "I am a businesswoman," I said, "and I am terminating this call." "Sophie, wait! Sophie!" I pressed the button. The line went dead. I looked at Elena. Block his number, block his email, block Clara and my mother too. Any further communication goes through his lawyer, if he can still afford one. "Done," Elena said. "And send the next notice," I said. "The notice of inspection. When do you want to schedule it?" "Friday," I said. 3 days from now. Tell them the new lien holder, me, will be conducting a full asset inventory to ensure the collateral has not been damaged further. Tell them I expect the premises to be accessible at 9 o'clock in the morning." "Do you want security to accompany you?" David asked. "Yes," I said. "But not just security. I want a sheriff's deputy. I want an official police presence to keep the peace. I don't trust him not to burn the place down just to spite me." I stood up and walked to the window. The rain was still falling, washing the city gray. I had the legal high ground. I owned the debt. I owned the reversionary interest. I had the forgery evidence. I had checkmated him in 3 different dimensions. But I knew the hardest part was not the paperwork. The hardest part would be Friday. I had to go back to that house. I had to walk through the door not as a daughter, not as a victim, but as the executioner of my own family's legacy. I looked down at the street, 42 stories below. The cars looked like toys. "He called me a monster," I said softly to the glass. "He is projecting," David said from behind me. "He is seeing his own reflection in the mirror and thinking it is you." "Maybe," I said. I turned back to the room. "Prepare the files. I want the transfer of deed ready to be signed on Friday. He is going to hand it over voluntarily." "Why would he do that?" Elena asked. "Because," I said, picking up the blue folder, "I am going to offer him the one thing he values more than money." "Which is?" "His reputation," I said. "Or what is left of it. I will give him a choice. Sign the house back to me quietly, and I bury the evidence of the forged letter, or fight me and I send the forgery to the district attorney." It was blackmail, perhaps, but in the world my father had raised me in, it was just leverage. "Friday at 9, I repeated. "Let's finish this." The gravel of the driveway crunched under the tires of my car, a sound that used to signal my arrival home, but today sounded like a gavel striking a sounding block. It was 9 o'clock in the morning on Friday. The sky was a bruised purple, heavy with unspent rain, and the air was cold enough to see my breath. I did not come alone. Behind my sedan was a black SUV carrying David and 2 junior associates from his firm, and behind them was a county sheriff's cruiser, its light bar silent but its presence screaming authority. I stepped out of the car. I was wearing a white trench coat, stark against the gloom of the day. I felt calm. It was a terrifying, hollow kind of calm. The sensation of a surgeon walking into an operating theater knowing the patient might not survive, but the cancer had to be cut out regardless. My father's Range Rover was parked near the porch, its trunk open. Suitcases were scattered on the lawn like debris from a crash. I walked up the steps. The front door was open. I walked into the foyer. The smell of lavender and wood polish was gone, replaced by the sour scent of panic, sweat, stale coffee, and cardboard. "You cannot take that. That is mine." Clara's voice drifted from the library. I walked toward the sound. Inside, the room was in chaos. Clara was tugging on a silver candelabra, while my mother tried to wrap a porcelain vase in a silk scarf. My father was standing by the desk, shoving papers into a shredder. "Stop," I said. The word was not loud. but it cut through the noise instantly. My father froze. He looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed, his skin gray and unshaven. He looked at me. Then he looked past me to the uniformed deputy standing in the doorway. The shredder whirred and then choked into silence. "You brought the police?" my father whispered. The betrayal in his voice was genuine, which was the most twisted part of it all. He truly believed he was the victim. "I brought a witness," I said. "Officer Miller is here to ensure the transfer of possession happens peacefully and to ensure that no assets belonging to the lien holder, me, are removed from the premises." "This is my house!" Clara screamed, hugging the candelabra. "Put it down, Clara," I said. "That candelabra is listed on the inventory schedule attached to the ironclad loan. It stays." Clara looked at her father for help, but Robert Whitaker was staring at the shredder. "We are leaving," my father said, his voice trembling. "We are vacating. You won. You have the house. Just let us take our personal effects." "Personal effects are clothes and toiletries," David said, stepping into the room. "Not antiques, not art, and certainly not financial records." David walked over to the desk. He reached out and unplugged the shredder. He pulled the bin out. It was half full of confetti, but the stack of papers my father had been about to feed into it was still sitting on the mahogany surface. My father lunged for the stack. "Don't," the deputy warned, his hand dropping to his belt. My father stopped, his hand hovering inches from the paper. I walked over and picked up the stack. I flipped through the pages. My heart hardened into a stone in my chest. These were not old tax returns. These were fresh printouts. They were emails. They were bank drafts. And near the bottom, I found it. The original letter of intent, the one with my forged signature that he had used to secure the loan from Ironclad. He had kept it, likely to gloat over it, or perhaps because he was too arrogant to believe he would ever be raided. But beneath that was something worse. It was a folder labeled Grandmother Trust Modification. I opened it. Inside was a draft of a document dated 5 years ago, just weeks before Grandma Eleanor died. It was a request to the doctors to declare her incompetent, a move that would have allowed my father to seize control of the trust early. It was unsigned, but there were notes in the margins in my father's handwriting. "Find a doctor who will sign. Price is negotiable." He hadn't just stolen from me. He had planned to betray his own mother on her deathbed. I looked up at him. I felt the last tether of familial obligations snap. It made a sound in my soul like a breaking string. "I offered you a deal on Monday," I said quietly. "I told you that if you went quietly, I would bury the forgery." "I am going quietly," he hissed. "I am leaving." "But you are destroying evidence," I said, holding up the files. "And I see now that the rot goes deeper than just money. You tried to gaslight Grandma, too." "She was old," he shouted. "She didn't know what she was doing. She was hoarding wealth while I was trying to build a legacy. She was protecting this family from you," I said. I turned to the deputy. "Officer," I said, "I would like to report a crime. I have physical evidence here of wire fraud, forgery, and intent to defraud a secured lender." My mother gasped. "Sophie, no." "You cannot do this," my father said, his face draining of color. "I am your father. You cannot send me to jail. Think of the scandal. Think of the shame." "The shame is yours, Dad," I said. "I am just the auditor." I handed the entire stack of papers to the deputy. "Please secure these as evidence," I said. "My legal team will forward the digital backups we have of the financial transactions to the district attorney's office by noon." The deputy took the papers. "Mr. Whitaker, I am going to have to ask you to step outside." "No," my father said. He backed away, bumping into the bookshelves. "No, this is a mistake. Sophie, tell him it is a mistake. Tell him we are playing a game. Tell him." "The game is over," I said. He looked at me. His eyes were wide, terrified, and full of a hate so pure it felt like heat. "I gave you life," he spat. "I gave you everything. You were nothing. You were a mousy little girl with no ambition. I tried to help you. I offered you $50,000. I tried to save you." "You tried to bury me," I said. "You should be grateful," he screamed, the words echoing off the high ceilings of the library where he had plotted my ruin. "You should be grateful I even acknowledged you." The room went silent. The echo of his voice hung in the dust motes dancing in the gray light. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had defined my worth by my bank account, who had viewed love as a transaction and family as a resource to be mined. "I am grateful," I said. He blinked, hope flickering for a second in his eyes. "I am grateful to Grandma," I continued, my voice steady and clear. "She taught me that integrity is the only currency that doesn't devalue, and I am grateful to the law, which does not care about your ego." I turned to the deputy. "Get them out of my house." The deputy moved forward. "Let's go, folks." My father didn't move. The deputy had to take his arm. My father flinched, then sagged. The fight went out of him. He looked old. He looked small. Clara dropped the candelabra. It hit the floor with a heavy thud, denting the wood. She ran out of the room, sobbing. My mother followed, her head bowed, refusing to look at me. My father was led out last. He stopped at the doorway. He looked back at me one last time. There was no more anger, just a profound, confused emptiness. He truly did not understand how he had lost. He had played by the rules of wolves, and he couldn't comprehend how the sheep had developed teeth. He disappeared into the hallway. I heard the front door open and close. I heard the car engine start. I heard the gravel crunch as they drove away, taking their noise and their chaos with them. I stood alone in the library. "Sophie?" David asked softly. "Are you okay?" I took a deep breath. The air in the room felt lighter. The oppressive weight that had hung over Cedar Hollow for years was lifting. "I am fine," I said. "Better than fine." I walked over to the window. I watched the sheriff's cruiser escort my father's Range Rover down the long driveway, past the oak trees, until they disappeared around the bend. "Call the locksmith," I said. "I want every tumbler changed, front door, back door, basement." "Already here," David said. "He is waiting on the porch." "And call the contractors," I added. "I want the humidifiers removed. I want the wallpaper fixed. I want the boxes of Clara's junk donated to charity by tomorrow morning." "Consider it done." I walked out of the library and into the foyer. I stopped at the front door. The locksmith was already at work, drilling out the old brass core, the lock my father had held the key to for too long. I stepped onto the porch. The rain had stopped. The clouds were breaking, and a shaft of pale, winter sunlight was hitting the fields below. I looked out over the property. It was mine. Not because I was given it, but because I had fought for it. I had paid the price in money, in tears, and in the loss of the illusion that I had a family. But as I looked at the horizon, I didn't feel the loss. I felt the space where the pain used to be, now filled with potential. I turned back to the door. The locksmith handed me a new key. It was silver, shiny, and cold. "All set, Miss Love," he said. "Thank you," I said. I put the key in the lock. It turned with a smooth, satisfying click. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The house was quiet. It was waiting for me. It was waiting for new memories, for laughter that wasn't forced, for success that wasn't stolen. I looked back at the driveway one last time, at the empty road where my past had just driven away. "Goodbye, Dad," I whispered. I stepped inside and closed the door firmly behind me. The latch clicked shut, locking out the world, locking out the ghosts. I was home. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop your location in the comments below and share your thoughts on Sophie's revenge. Did she go too far, or was it exactly what they deserved? If you enjoyed this journey, please subscribe to the channel Lila Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach more people who need a reminder that sometimes the best revenge is simply taking back what is yours.